Hi, this is Bruce Buffer, your voice of the Octagon, and you're listening to MMA Mental.
This post-fight interview is brought to you by MMA Mental, MMA Worldwide and YourMMA.tv. It is sponsored by Almighty Fightwear. For more post-fight interviews from the biggest promotions, please subscribe to the MMA Mental YouTube channel. Also, like MMAmental.com, MMA Worldwide, Your MMA and Almighty Fightwear on Facebook. And on Twitter, please follow at MMA Mental, at Your MMA and at Almighty MMA. I'm now joined by Richie Walsh. Richie is coming off a successful UFC debut with a unanimous decision victory over Chris Indich at the TUF Nations finale. Richie, thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. Congratulations on not only winning your UFC debut, but also having a good outing on The Ultimate Fighter as well.
Yeah, it was a good experience, and to be honest, I was just happy to get an opportunity to be on the finale. So, all positive for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen it in the past. The guys that stand out on the show tend to get a shot on the finale, and if you win your finale, you tend to get yourself a UFC contract. So you obviously made the right impression on the show. Let's talk a little bit about the show. What was it like then being part of the first Canada versus Australia season?
Look, Ray, it was something that I've wanted to do for a while. I'm a big fan of the show and quite familiar with the format of it. So having the opportunity to represent my country and do it on the Ultimate Fighter was like a blessing for me. So I tried out for the previous season, the Smashes, which was the UK versus Australia. I think unfortunately at the time I didn't make it, but fortunately in hindsight, it was a good thing I didn't make it because I got such a great opportunity in this season, and it obviously went out to more viewers and was a bigger showcase, as well as getting a trip overseas.
Yeah. What was it like working with Kyle Noak?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, Kyle's a lovely guy. He's not a very huge personality. He's a little bit shy. So getting to know him was probably not as easy as you think it was, but he didn't make it hard. He didn't put himself above anyone, and definitely picked up some good stuff from him. I definitely picked up some good ground and pound stuff, which I wasn't that familiar with, and just all round kind of knowledge of the game.
What was it also like sharing the house with 15 of the guys that are obviously all there for the same reason, especially knowing you were going to be competing against some of these guys?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting scenario, and I probably, if I could go back, I'd have a little bit more tactics to what I was doing. And I think from my impression of watching the show and just being around some of the other guys, I felt like the Canadians, were gamers. They're a little bit more switched on to exactly what they should be doing and how they should be acting in the house to kind of complement, their fighting and kind of keep it a bit of a mystery, whereas the Aussies would just kind of shake your hand and tell you how we fight and how we think we're going to beat you, which was a little bit of an eye opener. And they also done their research. They knew exactly who pretty much every single one of us, was, and how we fought and how we were going to fight, and we didn't know, nothing.
I mean, a lot of the results went the way, of course, of Canada. I mean, you were one of the only Australians that made it through to the semi-finals. And then, of course, we had an all-Canada final. Was it surprising that the Canadians did so much better than the Australians on the show?
Well, if you compare the two nations on an MMA scale, I mean, it wasn't really that surprising. Canada houses, many UFC guys. They have the welterweight champion. In my eyes, the best fighter ever, George St. Pierre. They've got Patrick Cote, Ryan Jimmo. They've got numerous, UFC stars. They've got numerous mixed martial arts facilities that are above and beyond, what Europe has and what Australia has. So, was it a surprise? Definitely wasn't a surprise that they beat us. But I think Australians have certainly got some good skills. Some grassroots, MMA down here is growing, and I think the athleticism and the want and the desire to be, at the top is there. It's just we haven't caught up with the rest of the world.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. I don't think that's just, necessarily Australia as well. You mentioned Europe there. We're in the same boat. We've got a lot of guys coming through. We've had a few that have made it on a big scale, but we've still got a lot of catching up to do with the North Americans, if you like, and probably the Brazilians as well. I think
that there's a point to be made there is, with England, or the UK or mainland Europe and Australia, it's all the same. Like, we have great stand-up, we have great facilities, great coaches for stand-up boxing, kickboxing. We have good jiu-jitsu in Australia here, and yet we seem to not quite have the wrestling. But I think that's just more of an excuse that people are using here, because I think Australia's got to disregard what we don't have and think about, hey, what do we have? We've got better Muay Thai than North America. We've got just as good jiu-jitsu. Maybe we don't have the wrestling, but let's use what we've got.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's still an evolving sport, isn't it? And a lot of countries are still catching up. I mean, of course, America, Canada, Brazil, probably the front runners, and a lot of other countries are now catching up. Let's talk a little bit about your fights. Your first fight in the house was against Matthew Desroches. What did you know about him going in, and how did you feel about facing him as an opponent?
Look, with Matthew Desroches, it was a little bit interesting. I mean, I didn't know much about him. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. My coaches didn't really give me too much of a breakdown on him. Besides, they obviously had their confidence in me, and they just said he throws big singular shots, but you'll be able to see him. His shots coming from a mile away. He likes to swing big ones. So just on that onus itself, I was going to try to keep my distance and just watch for that big shot and try and beat him to the shot with a straight jab or a straight cross. Besides that, I didn't know much. Had I fought him again, I would have just taken him down and tried to tap him, because I didn't realise he didn't have much jiu-jitsu.
Now, in the semi-final, you faced Olivier Aubin-Mercier, and of course, he was one of the standout guys on the show, and he was the favourite going into the finale. What were your views on him as an opponent?
As an opponent, look, he's a tricky one. Southpaws for me always. I don't think that they're harder to fight, but they're just a little bit more difficult to prepare for. So with him, he's got a very unorthodox style. Having watched a few of his fights now, I realise that he likes to, let you become comfortable, and he doesn't mind, taking a couple of shots, blocking a few shots, and just waiting maybe 1-2 minutes till he takes you down. He's going to take you down, but he doesn't make it so obvious that he's diving for your legs, which he did on me perfectly. He lured me, and as soon as I stopped moving, bang, he shot in straight away with that double. And then he came up my body. Most judo guys, they come in tall, they come in with their chin up. He does it very well, where he uses a punch, he comes in very low, and then he works his way up the body. So, I mean, you got to give the guy credit. He's got some really, really good skills. And from what I saw in the finale, I mean, he's got great hands as well. He just got outclassed by a guy that had prepared a little bit better, I think.
Now, there seemed to be, during the programme as well, there seemed to be sometimes a little bit of heat between, the Australians and the Canadians. A lot of it seemed to be maybe because of the cultural thing. The Canadians were a bit more... The Australians were a bit more direct to the point, like you said, we'll come out and we'll tell you how we're going to beat you, where the Canadians were a little bit more talk behind the back. Was there any general heat, and was there anyone in the house that really rubbed you up the wrong way?
Look, myself, I knew what we were there for. If someone was talking, they could have been talking a phenomenal amount of shit, and it wouldn't have bothered me. It's not something that I let get to me, but, you saw in the house, look, Brendan and a few other guys, it got to them, the Canadians might have been a bit loud and proud. But again, for me, I just didn't give a shit, I knew we were there to fight, and they could have been gaming us, they could have been doing what they want. The only guy that really I didn't think was just a great guy was probably Cajun Johnson. Nice guy, but I just didn't think he was a standout bloke, whereas most of the Canadians and the Australians were actually standout guys. If they're at a party or something, or a pub or whatever, I'd probably have a chat to these guys. So for the most part, everyone was kind of friendly to each other, got along, which, I don't know. It's like the Canadians and Australians, they don't have much of a rivalry between each other. So
yeah, it wasn't quite like the Smashes, was it?
Season, there was definitely more.
Yeah, especially with the whole cricket as well with Australia and England. Now, it's interesting you mentioned Cajun, because he seemed to... I mean, he come across quite well in the show. He did well in his fights, of course, and then he lost in the semi-final. But in the semi-final, I think what surprised a lot of people when they were watching it was the fact he didn't have anyone from his own country in his corner. And I know Vic felt quite bad for him. Was you surprised that no one from Canada cornered him?
Yeah, look, I'll tell you what the actual truth of what happened there and what you saw on TV. The actual truth was, this is what I've heard from sources within the house who were told, i.e. coaches from his team, that before the fight he he wasn't quick to grab who he wanted in his corner. So as soon as the fight was on between him and Chad said, I'd like, whoever in my corner. I'd like, he pointed to a couple of people. I'm just trying to think who was in his corner now. Ash, Crew Ash, who was their kickboxing coach. He said, I'd like Ash in my corner. And Patrick said, look, I'm going to stay out of it because I'm the coach. Obviously, Fabio was there, the jiu-jitsu coach. And, Fabio told me that Cajun said to him, he said, look, I don't want any advice when anyone's in my corner. I just want you to tell me the 2.5 minute mark, okay, so the halfway, and the 1 minute to go in the round. That's it. That's what he said. So, quote from one of the coaches, that they were his words. So the show kind of depicted it a little bit different, as in no one was coaching him, but his actual request was that he didn't want anyone coaching him.
Yeah, that's a bit strange, isn't it? I mean, even if you've got somebody, sometimes people in the corner, they can obviously see things that you can't see when you're in the heat of the battle. So that is a bit of a strange one. And that didn't come across on the show. So that's interesting.
I thought Nordine, being his teammate and being obviously very close to him, I think he should have jumped in his corner. Look, at the time, he probably thought he was doing the right thing, by not cornering anyone because they're both teammates. But it didn't look good that no one was in his corner, and you couldn't help but feel a little bit bad for the guy. But then they made it out as if none of the coaches wanted to be there and coach him. But really, I think that was kind of his wishes as well. And look, I think Cajun's a great fighter. I mean, he's got great skills, really slick jiu-jitsu. So I'm not detracting any of that away from him, but I think that was his wishes, that he didn't want to be coached. But then afterwards, I don't know why he was kind of making the point that no one was supporting him.
Yeah, that was a bit of a strange one. I think it probably made it worse as well, or made people feel more sorry for him because of the way the fight ended as well. Because it was quite a brutal knockout, wasn't it? Especially with his jaw obviously breaking, which is something you never really want to see.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially from standing, ringside, and you can hear the canvas jump up and down because there's, no one's yelling, no one's supporting either person because they're teammates. So it was dead kind of silent in there. Besides a few people, yelling out a couple of things here and there, or you can just hear the canvas bang, bang, bang up and down. And when he hit his jaw, I swear to God, that was one of the most, deafening sounds I've ever heard. And there was no doubt. I just looked at someone next to me and I said that he just broke his jaw. There was no doubt that he didn't break his jaw in that shot. So it's a pretty dramatic way to beat, one of your teammates. Again, I don't think they're great mates. They might be teammates, but they're not great mates. So it wasn't like he busted his best mate's face.
Yeah.
But he still had to break one of his teammates' face. But Chad's an actual competitor, and he's a guy who's in the sport because he wants to be here. He wants to win. You don't do this sport because you want to support your family and you want to do all this stuff. You're in this sport for yourself. Number one. Number two is going to be your country that you're representing there. Because, if you weren't in it for yourself, you wouldn't be fucking doing it.
Well, moving on to your fight at the finale, you were obviously, I'm sure it was bittersweet. You were great. You're going to get the call up. You're going to fight on the finale, which is always good because it means you've got a good chance to get a contract. And then you obviously found out you're going to be facing another Australian. How did you feel about facing one of your teammates?
Look, to be honest, Ray. There we go. There's some music there. To be honest, Ray, I thought that might be the case. I thought that they were going to give me an Australian. So I was kind of prepared for it mentally. I didn't expect that they'd give me Chris Indich. Just from the way the house went, I was presumed they might give me Jake Matthews maybe, or they'd give me Brendan. I didn't think they'd give me a Canadian. I just thought for some reason they'd give me an Australian, which they did. I was right, but I could have been wrong. They could have had planned a Canadian for me. They could have had Cajun Johnson for me had he not hurt his jaw and not been ready in time, you know what I mean? So for me to get the call up, I was just super happy. It didn't really matter at that stage who I was fighting. Again, it was a surprise fighting Chris.
So out of interest then, why did you think it wouldn't be Chris?
Well, I just thought they may have given it to a Canadian who won a semi-final before any of the Australians in the back of my head, but then I was thinking maybe they give it to Cajun Johnson. I was thinking, first of all, when I left the house, if I got another shot, it might be against Cajun. Then I was thinking, well, he probably won't be able to fight in time, so it'll more than likely be an Australian. And I just didn't think it would be Chris because I just didn't think offensively he did enough to earn a spot
Yeah.
in the finale. That's my logic. I thought Jake had more potential as a fighter, being 19 years of age, really young kind of kid. They might want to push him, but now in hindsight, looking back, of course, maybe they want Jake to have 3 more fights, get a bit more experience, and then be a winner in the UFC, not just get thrown straight in there as a young kid. He might not be 100% ready for it.
Yeah. So when you heard you were going to be facing Chris, then how did you feel about fighting him? What were your views on him as an opponent?
As an opponent, I thought this is a good match for me. I didn't think for a second that he was better than me in any area of the fight. I didn't think his striking was better than mine, or his wrestling was better than mine, or his jiu-jitsu. I trained with the guy before, so my confidence wasn't just being pulled from nowhere. It was I knew what I could do to him, and I knew how I could beat him, I guess. And I also knew his threats. I'd watched him fight before. I'd trained with him. I know he throws kind of off-timing, big, loopy shots, and the only chance that he was going to beat me was either trying to take a submission from guard, I thought, or his biggest chance would be a wild shot, which was catching me on the way back in from popping in and out, because he has that slow, awkward, big overhand and the big looping left hook.
So what was your game plan going into the fight?
The game plan was simple. It was kind of try to put my hands on him as early as I can, pressure him forward, and just put him on his back or put him on the cage and just feel how strong he is, because I hadn't felt him for a long time, and he was injured in the house just after the Chad fight with a bit of soft rib cartilage damage. I couldn't really get my hands on him to feel how strong he was, and I knew if I could feel how strong he was, if he was too strong, I'd disengage and I'd stop a little more. If he didn't feel strong against the cage and he didn't feel strong on the ground, I was just going to keep the fight there the whole time.
And was there anything in the fight that he did that surprised you?
Not really. I mean, I just feel like a guy like Chris, whose chance of beating me was probably by putting me on my back. He didn't, I watched him fight Chad, and he fought like a warrior. I'll give him that. He did. He really has some heart, and he's a hard dude to knock out. We knew that before the fight. I was thinking in my head, he's probably the hardest guy I know to knock out. I've seen him get hit really hard, and it hasn't fazed him too much. So maybe trying to stand there and just bang with him would give him an option to potentially win. So after watching him fight Chad, I didn't think that he had much game planning, or he didn't listen to his corner, one of the two. Because if you're fighting Chad, who's a real in and out, sharp, ISKA type kickboxer, and you're not as good as him, and you're a jiu-jitsu guy, why wouldn't you take him down or try to take him down or clinch with him? So I knew that he wouldn't have good game plan, so I was going to keep the distance and pressure him.
And it obviously worked because you got your first UFC victory. Now moving forward, we've seen a lot of guys come out of the house, and they don't always stay at the weight class they were in the house. So will you stay at welterweight, or will you be dropping down to a lower weight class?
I'm just looking at my bacon and egg roll with bacon, just thinking, damn, do I really want to go down to 155? Look, Ray, I'm gonna try to go down to 155. I'm obviously meeting up with some people this week, nutritionists and trainers, and we're going to see what we can do, because, that seems to be the way the sport's going. I don't necessarily agree with it, because, it puts a lot of people, a lot of fighters' bodies under pressure, but it's just the way the sport goes. You jump in the cage and the guy's 8-9 kilos, that's 20 pounds bigger than you, well then you're not doing it right and he's doing it right. That's just the way it's gone.
Yeah, and that's going to make a huge difference, especially the higher the level you get. Every advantage you've got, you need to be able to get, don't you? And fighting a guy who's outweighing you by 20 pounds.
I give the example in training. I'll spar with someone, I won't say any names, who's a friend of mine. When they were in training and they were fighting at 84 kilos and they were walking around at about middleweight and they were walking around about 86. I do extremely well with them, even though they're a weight class above me. Pick them up, take them down, blah 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 blah. I go to spar with this person now, and they're upwards towards 100 kilos, and I can't do anything. My game is nullified. I get tired against them quicker. In the clinch, you get tired. You can't take them down. So weight makes a huge difference. When you give away 5 to 10 kilos, you're giving away a lot. Takedowns become harder. Holding the person down, their powers more. So it does make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Now, when would you like to get in and compete again then? When will you be ready to fight?
Look, I mean, I have no injuries now, but I really want to focus on going back and being a student of the sport. And for me, it's not about fighting, and it's not about the money. It's about being better every fight. So I don't want to just turn around from this fight and have a fight 6 weeks later, in the UFC, and potentially not go back and learn a lot of techniques, because for me it takes 2-3 months to learn stuff in jiu-jitsu, learn stuff in wrestling, and then incorporate it in my game. So now I want to take a few months, put the gi back on, go back in a jiu-jitsu class, be one of the guys, high five the dudes, roll with the white belts, roll with the black belts, and just, be a student. So, anywhere onwards from three months, I think. So I need some time just to obviously build my body back up, watch my weight, and just learn.
Now, looking at where you are, of course, you're going to be dropping down to lightweight, or all going well. And looking at the UFC lightweight division, have you got your eye on anybody you'd like to face?
Ray, I haven't even given it a thought, to be honest. But you know what? I'd like to fight maybe someone from Europe. I wouldn't mind going over there for that.
And if you do, I'll be there to watch you.
Absolutely.
Well, Rich, I really appreciate giving me your time today. It's been great having a chance to have a chat with you.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, and all the best.
But before we let you go, Rich, just want to give you a chance to do some shout outs. So let the listeners know about your Facebook and your Twitter, and anyone you want to thank, any sponsors, anybody at all.
Yeah, guys, just follow me. It's Richie MMA, or at Richie MMA on Twitter, and Instagram, Richie.Walsh, all in capitals. Love you guys to follow me. Chuck me some comments. Follow me on my Facebook fan page, which is Richie Walsh MMA. Love to hear from you guys. Thank you.
Well, I can't wait to see you step back in, and hopefully it's a successful drop to lightweight. Thank you very much, Rich.
Thanks, Ray. Give us a call anytime, mate. Cheers.